Frank thought his life was stable until, at breakfast, his wife Iris confessed to a shocking act. An unexpected revelation ruins his world, forcing him to reconsider their relationship. But when everything seems lost, it gets even worse. People often say, the husband is always the last to know. And while that may or may not have been the case for me, one thing was certain. I did know. I didn't stumble upon the truth by chance, nor was I tipped off by a friend or one of my wife's enemies. No, I heard it straight from her. It was during breakfast after a passionate night together, and I was sipping my second cup of coffee when my wife, Iris, said, "My boss took me out for lunch yesterday. We ended up in a hotel room and spent most of the afternoon there. I enjoyed it, and will probably do it again." I was caught off guard, and after a few moments of silence I asked, "Why last night? Do you like to give me what's left over from someone else?" "I didn't give you this. I made sure everything was fine after we spent time together. And yet, you were with me just a few hours after someone else left. It's like a relic to me, no matter how you explain it." I guess I felt guilty and thought that being with you right after that might be better. Oh, I don't know what I was thinking. I just wanted to be with you. I hoped it would make a difference, but it didn't happen. I still like being with you. To be close? You just told me that you were with someone else and you plan to do it again. Where is the love in this? It was just an expression, Frank. I'm telling you this now so you can decide what you're going to do if you don't want me around anymore. Why would I want you around after that? I need time to think about what to do, and you'd better spend the night in one of the other rooms. That's not necessary, Frank. I just said that I like being with you. Maybe so, but I have no idea what else could happen, and I need to make sure everything is okay. I just hope it's not too late. Maybe you infected me with something from him last night. Her face turned pale when I said other women, with the obvious implication that she was one of them. And then she replied, "He wouldn't do anything that would risk getting him a disease. He has to be careful because of his wife." I shook my head in disgust and got up from the table to get ready for work. When I came out of the shower, Iris was sitting on the bed. "When I told you, I was hoping you'd take the time to decide if you still wanted me around. I hoped you'd say we needed to talk about it. What is there to discuss? You cheated on me and casually threw it in my face. If it was that easy for you to say, I have to wonder if this was the first time, or just one of many. How am I supposed to know that all those late nights at work were really about work? You said you spent most of the afternoon in a hotel room with Ted, so how can I be sure that this isn't something that happens a couple of times a week? How do I know Ted is the only one? No, Iris, there's nothing to talk about. Well, not entirely true. We'll need to figure out how to tell Dave and Marcy. And of course, there's your family and mine. We'll need to let everyone know, and chances are we'll have to explain why, because I have no intention of letting people think I'm the one who ruined our marriage. Everyone needs to know I'm not the one who destroyed it. It doesn't have to end like this, Frank. I love you. And aside from what happened with Ted yesterday, I've never been unfaithful. Yesterday was just something that happened in the heat of the moment. I did it just to do it. I wanted to feel like more than just the mother and housewife I've been for the past 24 years. I needed to do something wild and reckless for once in my life. And yes, I enjoyed it. But it wasn't because of any feelings I have for Ted. He just happened to be there at the right time. It was exciting, a huge thrill, but it didn't change my feelings for you at all. Maybe not for you, Iris, but it sure as hell changed mine. And I haven't forgotten that you said you'd probably do it again. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, at least not until I talk to an attorney. But you should consider our marriage over. No amount of talking is going to make me trust you again. I finished adjusting the Windsor knot on my tie, left the room, and went to work. My mind was far from work that day, and the company certainly didn't get their money's worth from me. I did take a moment to flip through the yellow pages, looking for an attorney near the office. I found one and gave him a call. The earliest he could meet was the next afternoon, so I scheduled an appointment. As I jotted it down in my planner, I realized the date. It was exactly 1 week before what would have been our 24th anniversary. Well, I thought, at least I won't have to waste money on a card or gift this year. After work, I headed straight home, simply because I had nowhere else to go. The idea of drowning my sorrows in a bar didn't appeal to me, and I wasn't about to seek out a friend to cry on their shoulder. Iris usually got home before me and had dinner ready by the time I arrived, and that night was no different. The table was set, and she had even opened a bottle of wine. Whatever she was hoping for, she wasn't likely to get it. Given how I was feeling, I probably should have just retreated to the den and ignored both Iris and the meal she prepared, but I had to eat, and it was already there. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down at the table. Dinner was meatloaf, gravy, mashed potatoes, and salad. I ate in silence. I could tell Iris was trying to build up the nerve to say something, and I just hoped she wouldn't speak before I finished my meal. It would be much more satisfying to stand up and walk out of the room on a full stomach once she started talking. It wasn't meant to be. I had just taken a bite of my salad when Iris spoke up. Would it make any difference if I told you it wouldn't happen again? I wasn't one to talk with food in my mouth, so I stayed silent while chewing. She shifted nervously before adding, "It was a mistake, Rob. A huge mistake that I deeply regret. One bad choice in 24 years of marriage, Rob. Can't you find it in yourself to forgive me for that one mistake? Does everything we've shared over these years have to be thrown away because of one bad decision?" By the time she finished, I had swallowed the bite of salad and replied, "It wasn't just one mistake, Iris. The first was when you let things go too far with someone else, and I'm not even sure Ted was the first. How do I know yesterday wasn't just another time you were with him?" I emphasized the word F-eck every time I said it, and each time I did, Iris flinched. "Your second mistake was telling me. If you had kept quiet, we wouldn't be in this tense situation." The third mistake, and it was a big one, was admitting that you enjoyed it and would likely do it again. So, to answer your question, yes, what we've shared over the past 24 years is now ruined because of what you did. You've completely destroyed my trust, Iris, and a marriage cannot survive without trust. At least, not a marriage I'm a part of. She stood up from the table, tears in her eyes as she left the room. I took a sip of my wine and finished my dinner. After I was done, I cleaned up the kitchen and then went to my study to spend some time on the computer. When I went upstairs to bed, I noticed that Iris had moved her belongings into Marcy's old room. She probably picked that room because Marcy wouldn't be needing it anytime soon. She got married and moved to California, only using the room during visits. Dave, on the other hand, still used his room when he came home on leave so he could return at any time. I didn't see Iris in the morning, so I stopped by a village inn for breakfast. Once I arrived at work, I waited until 9, when the day started at Wallish and Tilden, and then I called them. When the receptionist answered, I asked for Ted Harbauer. When he got on the line and greeted me, I said, "This is Rob Myers, Ted. Iris mentioned your afternoon escapade at the hotel, and I wanted to let you know that I'm kicking her out, so she's all yours. By the way, I'm really upset about this and will be looking for you. Make sure your health insurance is up to date because you're going to need it." I hung up before he could respond. I would track him down eventually, but there was no rush. Let him worry. Let him spend his time glancing over his shoulder, wondering if I was lurking in the shadows, ready to ambush him. That afternoon at 3 o'clock, I received some unfortunate news. Since we lived in a no-fault state, everything would be divided equally. Iris and I earned roughly the same income, so alimony was unlikely. The kids were grown and independent, which meant child support wouldn't be a factor. There could be some complications regarding our retirement plans, as we both had 401ks from our jobs, but the attorney believed they would offset each other. Overall, it seemed like the divorce would be relatively straightforward compared to most. Then the attorney suggested that we might consider pursuing an alienation of affections lawsuit against Harbauer. He also mentioned that we could potentially target Wallish and Tilden if their company had policies against intimacy misconduct among employees. I rejected that idea. I didn't feel it was fair to hold W&T accountable for Ted and Iris's actions. Additionally, if we pursued that route, both of them would likely lose their jobs, and we wouldn't gain anything from Harbauer, which could result in me having to pay Iris alimony. I instructed him to proceed with preparing the divorce documents and the paperwork for the suit against Harbauer and to have both served. It was past 4 when I left the attorney's office, so I figured there was no point in returning to work. During the drive home, I considered the division of our assets. We had significant equity in the house, which would be paid off in 3 years. Did I want to buy out Iris and keep the house? I didn't think so. What would a single man do with a large 4-bedroom house? Moreover, everything in that house would constantly remind me of how life had been before Iris's affair with Harbauer. So the options boiled down to Iris buying me out or selling the house. When I got home, Iris had dinner prepared, so I sat down to eat. I noticed she seemed to have something on her mind, but couldn't bring herself to express it. Just as I finished my meal and started to rise from the table, Iris spoke up. "Ted told me that you called him and threatened him today." "That's not true. I didn't threaten him. I made a promise." "You're only going to get yourself into trouble, Rob. You could end up in jail." "Why would you care?" "I'd be out of the way, allowing you to spend more afternoons in hotels with your boyfriend, assuming I leave him something to entertain himself with." "Please don't do this, Rob. I'm asking you for my sake." I chuckled and replied, "For you? Let me tell you what I did for you. I saw a lawyer today and asked him to start the divorce process. You can let your boyfriend know he won't be able to hide behind you." "I wasn't thinking about him. I just don't want to see you go to jail because of my foolishness." "I wouldn't mind. I could sit in there smiling, knowing you were the reason I was locked up. Just imagine how good it would feel to tell Dave and Marcy that you were the reason their dad was in jail." "Don't say things like that, Rob." "Why not? I've already told you I'm going to make sure everyone knows I'm not to blame for this marriage falling apart. Get ready for it, Iris. People will be asking you why you threw away your marriage. Also, think about what you want to do with the house. I don't want it, so if you do, you'll have to buy me out. Otherwise, it'll have to go up for sale." "Sell the house? Oh God, Rob, no. We can't do that." "Then you need to figure out how to buy me out." I left her sitting in the kitchen and went to the den to play on the computer. The following morning I was up and out before Iris woke up. At work, I explained to my boss, Barney, what was happening in my life and mentioned that I might need to take some time off for meetings with my attorney, court dates, and similar matters. He wished me well and told me to take as much time as I needed. When I got home, Iris wasn't there, so I warmed up some leftovers and watched TV for a bit. Then the phone rang, and it was my daughter, Marcy. "Mom called and told me you were leaving her." "Did she tell you why?" "She just said it was all her fault." "What happened?" "Let's just say it was all her fault. I planned to call both you and Dave to explain what was going on, because I didn't want anyone to think I was the villain in this, but if she has already taken the blame, that's good enough." "Is there any chance you two can work it out?" "Not a chance." "Why, Dad?" "You were so in love." The key word there, kiddo, is were. How's everything with you? Good. I would come home to help, but I'm tied up with an important project at work and can't leave. That's fine, honey. There's nothing you could do anyway. You don't need to call Dave. Mom talked to him too, and he called me to see what I knew. Take care, Daddy. I love you. I love you too, sweetie. I'll talk to you soon. 3 minutes later, Dave called, and our conversation was almost identical to the one I had with Marcy. I had just hung up when Iris walked in. Late night with Harbauer? I asked sarcastically. F*** you, Rob. Just so you know, I spent my time after work visiting both your parents and mine. I informed them about the upcoming divorce and took the blame for it. I didn't go into details. I just made it clear it wasn't because of anything you did. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to my room to lose it. I noticed tears streaming down her face as she left the room and headed for the stairs. A week ago, that sight would have had me rushing to her side to hold her and offer comfort. The following morning at work, Barney summoned me to his office. Is your divorce definitely happening? Is there any possibility it won't go through? You know, like you two working things out? There's no chance it won't happen. Why do you ask? Are the kids all grown and moved out? Is there anything really keeping you here? Not really, aside from my parents and sister living here. Why do you want to know? I've just learned that O'Brien is retiring and I need someone to take over his position in the Santa Monica office. How would you feel about relocating to California? The job is yours if you're willing to make the move. Are you serious? There are people here with more seniority who would jump at the chance for that position. Maybe, but being senior doesn't mean they can handle the job. I've evaluated everyone closely, and you're my choice. I'll accept it. When do I need to be there? O'Brien gave a month's notice starting yesterday. I'd like you to be there for his last week so he can bring you up to speed on everything. I'll start making arrangements right away. The first thing I did upon returning to my office was to call the attorney to inquire about how the move would impact the divorce. It depends on whether she contests it. If she does, you could end up making a lot of trips back and forth for meetings, hearings, and such. It shouldn't be an issue at all if she doesn't contest it. How could she contest it? I thought the whole point of no-fault divorces was to eliminate all the drama. That's usually the case, but only if both parties agree to the divorce. If she doesn't want to end the marriage, she could claim that it can be saved through counseling, and the court might order it. She can't prevent the divorce, but she can delay it and make it more costly, which might be enough to persuade the suing party to back down. I'm not stopping it. When will you serve her and Harbauer? The papers are ready. I just need your approval. Go ahead, this afternoon if possible. Consider it done. He called me at 3 that afternoon to inform me that the papers had been served at 2:35. When I got home from work, Iris was sitting in the living room, clearly having cried. She looked up at me as I entered the room and said, "You did it. You really did it. I can't believe you'd throw away 24 years over one mistake." You still don't understand, do you? It wasn't just that you slept with Harbauer. It was how you flaunted it, looking me in the eye and saying you enjoyed it and might do it again. Get this straight, Iris. I didn't throw away 24 years. You did. You need to decide what you want to do about the house because in 2 weeks I'm out of here. I stepped out of the room and into the kitchen to grab some leftovers from the fridge. After I finished eating, I went to the den and called Marcy, who was in California. After we exchanged pleasantries, I said, "I'm not sure if this is good news, but I'll be moving out there in about 2 weeks. You and Mom?" "Just me." I served her with divorce papers today. I need a favor from you. Anything for you, Dad, you know that. Can you look for apartments and condos near Santa Monica? Also, find a hotel or motel in that area for me to stay at when I first arrive. Absolutely not, Dad. You're staying with me. There's no way I'm letting you stay in a motel. Will that cause problems for you and Alan? Not at all. Don't worry about Alan. Okay, if you're sure. I am, Dad. I can't wait to see you. Me too, kiddo. I'll call you as soon as I have more details. The next morning, Iris was already sitting at the kitchen table when I came downstairs. "Good morning," she said, but I didn't respond as I poured myself a cup of coffee. "I've decided I don't want the house if I can't share it with you. I'll call a realtor this morning to get things started. It doesn't have to be this way, Rob." "I'm sorry, Iris, but it does." I poured my coffee into a travel mug and set off for work. While at the office, I contacted a real estate agent and scheduled a meeting at the house for 1 o'clock. By 3, the process was underway. On my way home, I stopped at a U-Haul location and bought several boxes to begin packing my belongings. When I arrived home, Iris was absent, but I found a note on the kitchen table indicating that she would be staying at her sister's for a few days. I spent the evening packing and moving boxes into the garage. By the time I went to bed, the only things left to pack were the items in the den and the clothes I would need for the next 2 weeks. The following day, my attorney called to inform me that he had received a message from Harbauer. He says we can forget about this because we lack evidence. All we have is what your wife told you, and he claims he will deny it. I hate to say it, but he's right. Don't drop the lawsuit. I'll see if we can find something useful. How do you plan to do that? I'm not sure. Let me think it over. I spent the next 2 days preparing for the move. Iris was still at her sister's, so when I got home from work, I called her sister to speak with Iris. When she got on the line, I told her we needed to talk and asked her to come home so we could sit down at the kitchen table. She agreed to come over but said she wouldn't stay long. She arrived at 7, and I had coffee ready. We sat down, and I told her about my plans to move to the coast. I handed her the real estate agent's card and explained that she would need to manage the sale, assuring her I'd return for the closing once the house was sold. I mentioned that I'd be staying with Marcy until I found my own place and that she could reach me there. Then I asked her the crucial question. "Why, Iris? Why did you cheat on me, especially with Ted Harbauer?" "I told you, Rob. It just happened. It was spontaneous." "I don't understand, Iris. How could it just happen and be spontaneous?" "I don't want to discuss it, Rob. It was a foolish mistake, and I lost you because of it." "Iris, I understand if you are hesitant to discuss this, but I need to know. Was I really such a terrible husband that you felt you could betray me like that? Was my performance in bed so inadequate that you had to seek satisfaction elsewhere?" "Rob, it wasn't about that at all. I can't fully explain my mindset at that moment. It was just supposed to be a lunch with Ted. When he flirted with me, I was completely taken aback. He had never shown any interest in me that way before. Maybe it was just how he approached me. He asked if I had ever cheated on you, and when I said no, I was curious why he'd bring it up. He admitted he had always been attracted to me, and since we were at a hotel restaurant with rooms upstairs, he thought he would take a chance. If I had cheated before, perhaps I would do it again with him. I think he was surprised when I told him to pay the bill and book a room for us. I realize this might not make sense to you, but as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to be more than just a wife and mother for once. I craved something exciting and daring, and Ted's advances offered me that opportunity. But why Harbauer? It just happened at the right moment, and he was the one who made the move. Why did you tell me you enjoyed it and planned to do it again? Was Harbauer really that much better? No, Ted wasn't better at all. It was the thrill of being with someone else that excited me. It felt exhilarating, and the rush was intense. I mentioned I might do it again because I craved that feeling. Confessing about Ted and me was another mistake. I was so confused. On one hand, the thrill heightened my emotions, but on the other, the guilt made me tell you the truth. I thought that by confessing, we'd have a conversation like this, and I could convince you that it wouldn't harm us. I believed it was just a temporary thing, and we would still share the love we've had for 24 years. I hoped you'd understand that I love you and that this phase would pass. And just so you know, Ted wasn't anything special. The excitement came from the situation, and it would have worn off eventually. I realize now that I should have remained silent and allowed things with Ted to come to a natural end. If I had kept quiet, you would still be with me because you would have been unaware. Does this conversation suggest you might reconsider? Not at all, Iris. I've already explained my reasons. This discussion has only cleared my mind. Now I understand that it wasn't anything I did or didn't do that led you to this, and knowing that will help me rest easier. Iris left, and I got up to turn off the tape recorder I had concealed on the kitchen counter. The following day, after making a couple of copies of the recording, I visited the attorney's office and provided him with one. I set aside a copy for Harbauer's wife, but decided to wait to give it to her until after the lawsuit with Harbauer was resolved. The following week was chaotic as I updated my replacement and prepared everything for the move. The house had been listed for sale, and we had already had 2 couples view it. Hopefully that was a good sign for selling it. On my last Friday at work, my colleagues organized a farewell party for me at a lounge just down the street, and the next afternoon, I found myself in a U-Haul truck heading to California. About an hour into the drive, I called Marcy for directions to her place. She must have been keeping an eye out for me because she dashed out the door and ran to greet me as I parked. After a big hug, she helped me unload my car from the trailer I had towed. Next, we drove to a storage facility where I stored my belongings in a rented unit. After that, we returned the truck and trailer to a local U-Haul dealer before heading back to Marcy's home. "Your first night here, we're going out for dinner," Marcy said. "Then I'll show you around." "What time will Alan arrive?" "Alan isn't coming. I kicked him out when I caught him with the woman next door." "Is there any chance you two could reconcile?" "About as much chance as you and Mom getting back together." I gave her a puzzled look, and she replied, "No one told me, Dad. I know my father and what kind of man he is. There's only one reason he would walk away, and Mom called to tell me that the breakup was entirely her fault. Plus, the woman next door was married, and when her husband was done with Alan, there wasn't much left of him. Why didn't you let us know?" "I was embarrassed, or maybe ashamed. You two had over 20 years together, and I couldn't even make it to 3. We went out for a lovely dinner, and then Marcy took me on a drive to help me get acquainted with the area. We ended up at a place called the Blue Grotto, which was quite nice and featured a fantastic live band. It seemed that Marcy was quite popular there, as we had barely sat down when several people came over to greet her. She introduced me to a few of the women and made sure to mention to some of them that I was single. "Why did you do that?" I asked. "If you're going to hang out with me, Dad, you can't just sit back and blend into the background. I'm going to spend a lot of time dancing with some of the guys here, and it wouldn't be fair to leave you alone at the table. Don't worry, the women here are pretty bold, and they'll approach you." "I'm not so sure, sweetie. This isn't really my scene." "It might not be, but this place is exactly what you need right now. It'll help bring some excitement back into your life." Just then, a pretty blonde approached our table and said, "Can I borrow your dad for a dance?" Marcy laughed and said to me, "See what I mean?" By the end of the night, I had danced with 5 different women, 2 of whom gave me their phone numbers and asked me to call them. I must admit, it felt like a huge boost to my ego after what Iris had put me through. I know she told me I was fine, but in the back of my mind, I had some lingering doubts. After all, she did leave me for another man. While driving back to Marcy's place, I asked her if she had found any suitable apartments for me. She replied that she had several options, but I wouldn't need them since I was going to stay with her. "I don't think that's a good idea, sweetheart." "Why not?" "I noticed how you danced with some of those guys tonight, and I wouldn't want to interfere with your romantic life." "Come on, Dad, those guys have their own places." "True, but what if I decide I want to explore a little? We're adults, Dad, and you have your own room. We'll figure it out." The following week was hectic as I adjusted to my new job and familiarized myself with the team working under me. It seemed Barney must have mentioned something to Pat O'Brien, who then spread the news. There were 3 single women in the office, and I noticed that 2 of them seemed interested in me. However, despite both being attractive, I considered them off-limits. I had no intention of getting involved in a workplace romance, especially considering the potential for intimacy harassment claims. On Friday night, I returned to the grotto with Marcy, and I have to admit, I had a fantastic time. Anna, one of the women who had given me her number, joined us at our table and asked why I hadn't called her. I explained that I was still moving in and acclimating to my new job and surroundings, adding, "I almost didn't let Marcy convince me to come here tonight." "Well, you're here now, so let's pretend you called me and we agreed to meet." Marcy chuckled and said, "You're on your own, Pops. If I were you, I'd just go with the flow." I took her advice and had a delightful evening with Anna. When last call arrived, Marcy handed me her car keys and remarked, "Don't wait up. It's Saturday, and I don't have any plans, so I might not see you until around noon." As Marcy walked away with one of the guys she had been dancing with, Anna commented, "It sounded like she was hinting that you wouldn't be interrupted, if you know what I mean." I certainly caught her meaning, and it sparked a conflict in my mind. On one hand, I thought, "You can't. You're still a married man," while on the other, the thought, "You're separated and going through a divorce, so you're practically single," fought back. Meanwhile, a voice on the sidelines was jumping up and down, screaming for attention. "You haven't had intimacy since finding out about Iris." I wasn't sure why I hesitated so much. My own daughter encouraged me to move forward, and the fact that Iris broke her marriage vows made me feel like I was no longer bound by my own. After all, the phrase, "you weren't happy," tipped the scales in favor of Anna's proposal, and I was glad that it was so. It's been a long time since I've felt such passion. Anna was determined to awaken a side of me that had been dormant for many years. We spent the night together, experiencing a deep connection. We fell asleep, hugging each other tightly. In the morning, we had another moment together, after which we took a shower, where everything flared up again. At breakfast, Anna casually mentioned that she was not one of those who settle down. "I'm not the type to enter into a long-term relationship," she said, "but I can be a great friend to my advantage. If last night was any indication, I'd say the benefits are worth it. Can I apply?" "Actually, you had an interview last night and you got the job." I drove her home and returned to Marcy. When I entered, she smiled at me knowingly and made a good sign with her hand. I smiled back and said, "Very much." Over the next 2 months, I saw Anna several times a week, and each time it was a real adventure. But one Sunday morning, she told me that our time together had come to an end. She accepted a promotion that brought her to Atlanta. I was disappointed, but I knew it was the right move on her part. Marcy assured me that she had plenty of other options. "Anna has been telling everyone how wonderful you are, and I bet you'll find a new lover soon." She was right. The following Friday, I met a woman named Melissa. She's chalk to friends. She asked me to dance several times, and during the last dance of the evening, she leaned over and whispered, "I want to have fun tonight. Can I be a little wild with you?" I didn't have any obligations that night, and I agreed. Mel was a brave woman. She liked bright and exciting moments, and she wasn't shy about letting me know what she wanted. We spent an unforgettable evening together, and after that she asked if we could meet again next Friday. "Absolutely," I replied. For the next 2 months, Mel and I were friends with benefits. Our meetings were limited to Thursdays and Fridays since she worked afternoons, and those were her days off. We had to meet at Marcy's place because of her mother's situation. "If I brought you home, she wouldn't understand," Mel would say. Mel's energy was only manageable a couple of times a week. Everything changed one Monday night toward the end of our second month. After work, I walked to my car and noticed a man leaning against it. As I approached, he stood up and said, "About time you showed up." "Do I know you?" I asked. "No, but you're going to wish you hadn't met me." "What's this about?" I replied. "I'm here because you've been seeing my wife." "That's not true. I'm not involved with anyone's wife." "You're denying that you've been with Melly?" "Mel? She's not married." "Yes, she is. We've been married for 10 years. If that's the case, I had no idea. She doesn't wear a ring, and no one mentioned she was married. But let me tell you this. If you two break up, I'd gladly take her in." "Why would you want that? If she cheats on me, she'd cheat on you too." "Have you asked her why she's been unfaithful?" "She doesn't know I'm aware." "Maybe you should find out." "All I know is that I won't give her a reason to stray. But now that I know she's married, I'll keep my distance until you two work things out. But I have a question for you. How can she be out every Friday and Saturday night without you knowing? I drive a truck, and I'm gone from Thursday to Sunday." He stared at me for a moment, and I braced for an argument, but to my surprise he turned and walked away. I spent the following week considering who I could find to replace Mel. I stopped by the grotto on Friday, and about 30 minutes after I arrived, Mel walked in, noticed me, and came over to sit with me. She took a seat and said, "I hear you've met Royce. If Royce is your husband, then yes, we have. Will that prevent us from having fun together?" "That depends on what unfolds." "In what way?" "I told him I would keep my distance from you unless he let you go. Has he thrown you out yet?" "No, and he won't because he loves me." "Then we can't play together." "Why not?" "Because you're married, and if I had known that from the start, I never would have gotten involved with you. I would never intentionally do to another man what my wife and her lover did to me." "I don't see it like that. I'm just looking for something different than what Royce offers. I love him, but I need more than just the same routine twice a week. Maybe if things had been different when we got married, I wouldn't feel this way. But I enjoy trying different things, and sometimes I need something a bit more exciting than what he's comfortable with. What we have is great, babe. Let's not end it." "Sorry, Mel, but unless Royce tells me you two are no longer together, this is over." She looked at me for a moment, then moved to another table. Within 5 minutes, she had another guy sitting with her. I danced with a few other people but didn't pursue anything. About an hour before the place was closing, the guy with Mel went to the bathroom and she came over to me. "Last chance," she said. "Sorry, Mel. You know where I stand." "Your loss," she replied and went back to her table. When the guy returned, they left together. That night brought more changes than just in my relationship with Mel. Around 4 in the morning, I was suddenly awakened by loud noises coming from the wall between my room and Marcy's. Along with the noise, I could hear Marcy's voice, clearly enjoying the moment. It took me a while to fall back asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I knew my priority for the day was finding myself a new place to live. Marcy was making breakfast when I walked into the kitchen. As I poured my coffee, she smiled and asked how I'd slept. I figured there was no need to tell her she woke me up, so I just said, I slept like a log. It was a Saturday, and I spent most of the day searching for an apartment. I found one I liked and completed the paperwork. When I returned to Marcy's, she said, "Mom called. You need to call her back." "Why?" "She has a contract on the house." "So? I'll just send her a power of attorney by mail." "Reach out to her, Daddy. Talking to her won't hurt you." I hadn't been in contact with Iris since moving to the coast, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear her voice. Staying away from her made it easier to push her actions out of my mind. I had loved that foolish woman. In fact, I still loved her, and she was always on my mind. I even thought about her when I was being intimate with Anna and Mel. No, I truly did not want to hear her voice. But Marcy was determined and handed me the phone, saying, "Make the call." I should have responded with no, and left the room, but I didn't. I dialed my old home number. It rang 4 times before. "Hello?" "Hi, Iris. Marcy said you called and wanted to talk to me." "How are you, Frank?" "I'm okay, Iris. What did you want to discuss?" "I miss you, Frank." I have no idea where that came from. Honestly, I didn't intend to say it, but the words "I miss you too, Iris" just came out before I could think. "Oh my God, Frank, are you serious? What did you just say about Iris?" There was a brief silence, then she continued, "We found a buyer for the house. I waited to reach out until their financing was confirmed. The closing is scheduled for the 12th at 2 p.m. Can you be there?" "I'm not sure. That's only 6 days away. It's a bit last minute, but I'll try to make arrangements and get back to you." "I hope you can come, Frank." "We'll see, Iris. I'll call you tomorrow." As I ended the call, I pondered why I hadn't simply mentioned that I would send my power of attorney to her father or brother via FedEx. Marcy noticed my expression and asked, "What's wrong, Dad?" "What are you thinking about?" I gave a shrug and responded, "I'm trying to decide whether to return or just send my power of attorney. Why wouldn't you want to come back?" "The mere sound of your mother's voice upsets me, so I don't know how I could handle seeing her. I'm not sure I can manage it." "When will you start being honest with yourself, Dad?" "What do you mean?" "I saw the look on your face when you were talking to Mom. You miss her. I don't know the details of what happened between you two, except that it hurt you deeply at the time. But not being with her is really affecting you. I never intended to tell you this, but Mom calls a few times each week to ask how you're doing. She's miserable, Dad. She misses you terribly. It's been months now, and maybe you've healed enough to sit down with her. You need to go back, Dad. It won't hurt you. While we're discussing what I need to do, you should know that I'm looking for my own place. Why? What we have here is working. For the most part, it has been, but it's time for me to give us both some space." I saw the sudden understanding register on her face, and she blushed before saying, "I need to check on dinner," as she quickly left the room. After a quiet dinner, Marcy asked, "Are you going to the grotto tonight?" "Number, I think I'll just relax in front of the TV for a while." "The ladies will be disappointed. I know a couple of them who are eager to take Melissa's place. You're not making any sense, little girl. On one hand, you're telling me to go back and try things with your mom, and on the other, you're hinting at setting me up with your friends at the grotto." "That's not what I meant. I'm not sure if it's even possible for you and Mom to work things out. What I was trying to say is that you need some kind of closure. I'm still staying in tonight. I need to pack. I found a new place, and all I'm waiting on is the credit check. I'll probably move in on Monday or Tuesday." On Monday, I received a work call informing me that my approval had come through. That evening, I began moving into my new residence. I had rented a 2-bedroom apartment, planning to convert the second room into a home office. Marcy was adamant about accompanying me, and as we moved items in, she commented things like, "I have the perfect curtains for this room," and "Ugh, this carpet color is absolutely awful. You should request a replacement." She assisted me in setting up the kitchen before heading home, leaving me to spend my first night alone in the new place. The following day was dedicated to settling in, and soon the day of decision arrived. I had to choose between returning for the closing or sending my power of attorney via fax or FedEx. After much deliberation, I opted to go in person. I grabbed my phone and made the call. "Hello?" "It's me. I've decided to attend the closing instead of sending a power of attorney. Where is the closing being held?" "In the conference room at the First Bank on Shepherd at 2 o'clock. I'll prepare the spare bedroom for you." "I don't think that's a good idea. I'll stay at the hotel just down the street from the bank. Don't be ridiculous, Frank. There's no need to spend money on a hotel room when you still own a 4-bedroom house. I'll consider it. See you at the bank. Goodbye. Since my last conversation with Melissa, I had spent a lot of time reflecting, and those thoughts continued during my flight back. I wondered if Iris had acted the way she did for similar reasons that led Mel to leave Royce. Was I too passive in my relationship with Iris? We were close, but had we ever truly connected on a deeper level? I couldn't recall being with Iris in the same way I was with Anna or Melissa. Did she sometimes crave a different kind of connection? Something more passionate? Iris had told me that her actions weren't because of any inadequacy on my part, but because she wanted to experience something wild and adventurous for the first time in her life. Was that true, or was she trying to spare my feelings? Was the real reason she turned to Harbauer because she needed something more? I doubted I would ever fully understand. When I arrived, Iris was already in the conference room. She smiled as I entered, then stood and began to approach me. I quickly moved to keep the table between us, and her smile faltered a bit. I couldn't help but notice she looked great, clearly dressed up for me. She wore my favorite dress, paired with her best heels, and had styled her hair just the way I liked. Before Iris could speak, others entered the room, and we focused on completing the necessary paperwork. Once we finished, I had a check in my pocket for $87,362.36. But who was counting? As we were leaving, Iris asked, "Are you staying at the house? We don't have to leave until the 15th. I don't think so. I have some things to take care of, and then I'll try to catch the late flight back to the coast." I saw the disappointment on her face as she said, "Frank, will you ever forgive me?" "Iris, I'm not sure. You really hurt me deeply. Maybe with time things will ease, but I can't say for sure. I need to go now. Goodbye, Iris." She stood there watching me walk away. It was hard to leave, and I'll admit it. I wanted to hold her. A voice in my head whispered, "Relax, Frank." She made a mistake and admitted it. You're still married to her, and yet you had your own moments with Anna and Mel. Maybe one balances out the other. You still want her, don't you? Ignoring that voice wasn't easy, but I forced myself to keep moving forward. At 5, I was parked down the block when Harbauer came out of the building and got into his car. As I waited, I thought about what my lawyer had been telling me about the lawsuit against Harbauer. He had refused to settle and said that if we pushed it and he lost in court, he would just file for bankruptcy and avoid any payout. When Harbauer pulled away from the curb, I followed him. He drove to the Apollo Lounge, and I parked behind him. I found a spot close to the door and waited. As he walked toward the entrance, I stepped in front of him and said, "Hi there, Ted. Long time no see." He looked startled and tried to turn away, but I stopped him, facing him directly. I wanted him to understand the consequences of his actions, but I restrained myself from doing anything more than confronting him. After a moment of silence, I walked away, got back into my car, and drove off. From there, I went to 1384 Meadowbrook Lane, rang the doorbell, and handed Janet a copy of my conversation with Iris. I said, "I'm sorry, Janet, but you need to hear what's on this recording. You don't deserve this." Then I walked away. 2 hours later, I was on a plane heading home. The next morning, I called my attorney and instructed him to drop the lawsuit against Harbauer. I decided to give his wife a copy of the recording and let her deal with him. "That was a smart move," he replied. "The courts have been lenient on these kinds of cases lately. The final hearing for your divorce is a week from Friday, and you don't need to attend. 60 days after that, you'll be a free man." For some reason, that news didn't bring me any sense of relief. I deposited the check from selling my house and mentally scheduled to begin searching for condos in roughly 4 months. I had a 6-month lease on my apartment, which kept me there for the time being, but as the lease was nearing its end, I needed to start looking for a more permanent residence. The week flew by, and on Friday night I went to the grotto. I danced with several women there, but I didn't feel inclined to pursue any of them. It's not that I would rule them out in the future, but that evening I just didn't feel like taking any action. I saw Mel, and she waved at me, which made me briefly regret discovering that she was married. I decided to call it a night and headed home around 10 o'clock. On Saturday night I returned to the grotto, and about 20 minutes after settling in, Marcy joined me at my table. Soon after, some of her friends arrived, and we had to combine a couple of tables to fit everyone. One thing I've always noticed about the grotto is that the women there are confident and know what they want. I was invited to dance more often than I extended invitations myself. At our table, 3 women besides Marcy asked me to dance. I danced several times with each of them, and around 11 o'clock, while dancing with Ruby, she leaned in closer and, in a low voice, said, "Anna once told me that if I ever had the chance, I shouldn't miss it. What do you think, Frank? Do I have a shot?" "I think I'd regret saying no. Is there any reason we can't leave right now?" "None that I can think of. Your place or mine?" "My place. I'm more comfortable there, at least for the first time." She wasn't as unruly as Mel had been, yet she still tired me out. When Ruby failed to wake me up again, I got out of bed and reached for my pants. "Where are you headed?" "Home, so you can get some rest." "That's ridiculous. Come back down here. We haven't reached the best part yet." "The best part?" "The cuddling, snuggling, and falling asleep together. And of course, waking up together." She was right. Waking up together was fantastic. For the subsequent 2 months, Ruby and I met 2 or 3 times each week. Our relationship was purely friends with benefits, and we were both fully aware of that. However, one night Ruby nearly broke me. As I lay on my back, struggling to breathe, she ended things abruptly. "Tonight is our last night, my dear. I'm becoming too emotionally involved with you," she said. And just like that, it was over. I felt disappointed because I had grown quite comfortable with Ruby. While I was involved with Ruby, everything fell apart between Melissa and Royce. Royce pursued Melissa's current boyfriend and injured him so severely that he ended up in intensive care. As a result, Royce was arrested, and Melissa not only refused to post his bail, but also had divorce papers served to him while he was in jail. 2 weeks after Ruby ended our relationship, I received a call from Melissa. "You said you wouldn't see me until Royce and I were over. Can you make time for me on Friday?" "Are you certain? What about the other guys you've been dating? They don't measure up to you. It's a yes or no. Could I really turn down such a confidence boost? Do you want me to come pick you up? Let's say 7? And be ready for the chance that we might not even leave my place?" We didn't fall asleep, and we never did until after 2 in the morning. The next morning we had a wake-up session followed by a shower, and then we went out for breakfast at the Village Inn just down the road. We spent the weekend together and scheduled a meeting for Tuesday. On Monday, my lawyer called to inform me that the divorce was finalized. "I've sent the documents, and they should reach you by Thursday. Are you planning to come back and celebrate?" "Not right away, but possibly by the end of the month." When I ended the call, I realized there was nothing to celebrate, only a profound sense of loss. The following 2 months were occupied with work, searching for a condo, and dealing with Mel. Royce had been convicted of assault with malicious intent and was serving a 9-month sentence at the county work farm, while Mel's divorce was progressing. She began discussing our future together once she was free, clearly hoping I would propose to her. I remained silent because it wasn't going to happen. She was an excellent partner in the bedroom, but she had willingly cheated on Royce with multiple men. I could see myself being with her for many years, but I could never marry her, and sooner or later I would have to let her know that. Sooner arrived much earlier than I had anticipated, and there was no need for me to inform her. It was more about revealing it to her than simply telling her. It was a Saturday night, and Mel and I were at the grotto. We were dancing when I happened to glance toward the entrance and saw Marcy walk in. She wasn't alone. Iris was with her. Saying that Iris looked amazing would be a huge understatement, and I must have tensed up because Mel noticed and asked if something was wrong. I assured her I was fine, just feeling a sudden chill. We had been seated at two closely placed tables with some of the regulars, which was naturally where Marcy headed. By the time the band finished the song Mel and I were dancing to and announced they were taking a break, Marcy and Iris were at the table. From behind Mel, I saw Marcy introducing Iris to the others at the table, likely referring to her as my mother, as I caught a few quick glances in my direction. Mel and I walked back to the table, and Iris saw me approaching. Her face broke into a big smile that quickly faded when she realized the woman walking next to me was actually with me, not just passing by. Mel and I sat down, and Iris greeted us. "Hi, Frank. How have you been?" "Not bad, Iris. And you?" "I've been better, but not for a while. Are you going to introduce me to your friend?" "Certainly. Mel, this is Iris, and Iris, this is Melissa, although she prefers to be called Mel." "Oh, come on, Frank, surely you can do better than that." "Okay. Mel, this is Iris, my ex-wife," emphasizing the ex part. "Iris, this is Mel, my main squeeze." Mel laughed and said, "Oh, goody. Maybe we can all get together and exchange stories." Based on Iris's expression, I realized it would never happen. The table was filled with casual conversation, and Iris intentionally avoided looking in Mel's direction. When the band returned and began the first song of their next set, I took Marcy's hand and led her onto the dance floor. "What on earth is happening here?" "Mom called me and asked if she could stay with me now that you've moved out and have your own place." "Was I supposed to refuse my mother?" "Don't you think you should have given me some warning before bringing her in here?" "Probably, but she wanted to surprise you." "Well, she sure did that. Damn it, Marcy. How could you do this to me?" "It wasn't difficult, Dad. I love both of my parents, and it's clear to me that you two still care about each other and aren't denying it. I saw your face brighten for a moment when you first saw her walk in, and I've heard enough from her over the past few months to know that being apart from you is killing her. If there's anything I can do to bring you two back together, I will. Bringing her here tonight is just the first step." "You're meddling, Marcy." "I know, but like I said, I care about both of you and want to see you reunited." "There's no chance of that, little girl. No chance at all." "We'll see," she responded as the song ended. As the next song began, we made our way back to our table, and I noticed a man inviting Iris to dance. They moved onto the dance floor while Marcy and I sat down. Iris and her partner danced for 3 songs, and halfway through the third, I felt a sharp pain in my ribs. I turned to see Mel staring at me. "You're supposed to be here with me, not dancing on the floor with your ex," she said. "What are you talking about?" I responded. "You haven't looked away from her since she started dancing, and judging by your expression, it seems like you want to go out there and confront the guy she's dancing with." I realized she was right. I did want to go out and tell him to back off from my wife. My wife? Where did that come from? She wasn't my wife anymore. "Call me when you know what you truly want," Mel said as she stood up. "Right now, it's clear to me that your heart is on the dance floor." She walked away, leaving me sitting there alone. While on the dance floor, I noticed a man's hands move toward Iris in a way that made me uncomfortable. I felt a surge of anger and quickly approached them. I stepped between them, addressing the man firmly but calmly. "Please respect her personal space." The man looked at me, considering a confrontation, but after a brief pause, he decided to walk away. I turned to Iris, who had a puzzled expression on her face. "Aren't you forgetting something, Frank?" she said, raising an eyebrow. "We're not together anymore." "I know," I replied, but I didn't like the way he was acting. "Maybe I was fine with it," she said calmly. "You don't have to protect me anymore." I took a deep breath, realizing the tension between us. "You're right. I still care, even if things are different now." She sighed, and after a moment of silence said, "I understand, Frank, but you have to let me make my own choices." I nodded, feeling the weight of our past, and we parted ways, leaving the club quietly. "Why not?" "You seemed to want some attention earlier, didn't you? Maybe you were okay with that guy's hands on you." "I've never done anything like that before, Frank." "There's a first time for everything, Iris. Didn't you once talk about wanting to try something exciting and different? But if you want this to happen the right way, we can leave now. If you want to be with me, take me somewhere private, but not here and not like this. Get in the car, Iris. I need to grab my purse and my other shoe. Marcy will take care of that. Get in the car." "Okay, Frank." She walked to the passenger side and got in. As we drove, the tension between us remained, but we both knew there was more to talk about once we got home. Once we arrived, she looked at me with a mix of emotions. "Do you still want to talk, Frank? Or something more?" "Let's go inside and figure it out," I said, trying to stay calm. We went inside, and what happened next was a turning point. For the first time in a long while, we shared a moment of real intimacy. It wasn't about love or reconnecting emotionally. It was simply about being together in that moment, releasing the built-up tension. Afterward, we sat in silence, reflecting on what had just happened. She eventually leaned on my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you, Frank," before falling asleep. I stayed awake for a while, trying to make sense of it all, before I finally drifted off as well. When I woke up in the morning, Iris was already up, sitting on the edge of the bed and watching me. As soon as she noticed I was awake, she began, "Why, Frank? Why what? Why last night? You seemed eager to get rid of me, yet yesterday evening you were jealous. It was obvious on your face, Frank. I could tell, and so could anyone else paying attention. Your expression clearly said, 'That's my woman. You have your hands on an asshole.' Am I, Frank? Am I your woman? Iris, I don't know what happened last night. It just occurred, and I can't explain why. Well, I'm glad it happened, Frank. I just wish it had happened sooner." She got out of bed and said, "If you tell me where everything is, I'll make us some breakfast. There's nothing here. I haven't done the grocery shopping this week yet. We'll go out to the village inn, but first you should call Marcy. She might be worried." "I don't think so. I believe that what happened last night is what she hoped would happen when she brought me to that place. I think you're the one who needs to make a phone call." "Me? Who should I call?" "The young lady you were with last night." "Why do I need to call her?" "I'm hoping you'll tell her that you won't be seeing her anymore. I want more nights like last night, Frank. Maybe another 20 or 30 years worth." I lay there staring at her, and suddenly realized that I wanted that too.